Hey, good afternoon to you. It's now 5:07 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We continue to track all of the chaos going on in California. The deadly fires continue to rage there. The death toll, some reports now say, has risen to 25. Thousands of structures burned to the ground, entire neighborhoods just completely flattened. And government officials who don't seem to have any idea how to respond to a fire, which is quite unfortunate. I saw the New York Times today reporting that Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, had insisted, as she took the job in an interview with the New York Times, I guess just published now, that this element of it, that she would never go abroad while she was the mayor. She insisted that, no, my job is here. The only traveling that she would do is within the domestic United States to attend to the business of the people of Los Angeles. She quickly broke that promise, and doubtless many others, and traveled all over the planet to include, very recently, just a couple of days ago, she was attending the inauguration of the new president of Ghana in Ghana. And it was during that trip, of course, that her entire community started to smolder. It's another promise broken by a Democrat, and this is the kind of devastation it takes for the New York Times to tell you about it. It's crazy. Well, what are they going through, and what comes next? Our next guest is focused very focused on this. Thomas Catenacci is here. He's a reporter for the Washington Free Beacon and joins us on the phone. Hello, Thomas. Good to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, it's great to be here, Vince.
Okay, so California seemed to be caught completely asleep at the switch. That is, the leaders of that community, as this wildfire overtook these huge neighborhoods in Los Angeles. There's no reason for the mayor to be out of the country. It's wildfire season. The Santa Ynez winds are whipping up to 100 miles an hour, exactly the conditions that would lead to a fire like this. How badly did they screw this up, Thomas?
Yeah, well, I think, just on the response part, I want to just reference a colleague's reporting of mine at the Free Beacon, which is fantastic. On, 2 months ago, the LA Fire Department issued a memo to the mayor's office begging for more resources. They said they were about half-staffed, just not enough, not big enough of a budget, and really warning that something like this could happen and that they would be completely unprepared for it. And then that memo, instead of publicly addressing the memo and why there were these staffing issues, Karen Bass, the LA mayor, deleted the memo over the last 48 hours to just try to, it almost looks like a cover-up.
Deleted it.
So I would say that.
I'm sorry, deleted it from where? The internet? Is that, she deleted a public record? Is that what happened?
Yeah, she deleted it. It was publicly linked through the LA mayor's office website, and they just scrubbed it. Now, if you go to the link, it shows up as a 404 error. So I wanted to just kind of start at the top with that because it really kind of sets the stage for how government leaders in California are handling this. And now what my reporting has kind of focused on is the environmental permitting aspect to this. Everyone knows what the issue is in California. The conditions are such that these types of fires can happen and they can get quite out of control. So the question is, what do we do about that? There are two really different types of treatments, forest management treatments, one of which is mechanical, using heavy equipment to thin trees in areas where there's a lot of brush, what they call fuel for these types of fires. And then there's prescribed burns, which involve, a government agency or even sometimes, a fire department or, a local group going in and burning a controlled area to get rid of brush that's very flammable in a wildfire situation. And the problem is a lot of this is on state and federal land. And whenever there's a project on state and federal land, it falls under environmental protection laws, which take years and years of permitting and environmental analyses to do before you can actually go through with whatever project it is,
Yeah.
and it applies for these forest management projects. And what we've seen is, while government leaders and local leaders say they know what the solution is, and we all know what the solution is, these laws are being weaponized by environmentalists and
Yes.
activists within the government to prevent the exact treatments that everyone, again, says that we need.
And California is exceptionally annoying about its so-called environmental laws, to the point that it makes it almost impossible to get a structure built in that state, right?
Oh, yeah. And it really falls under the California Environmental Quality Act, which is sort of the marquee law in California that blocks just about every project on state land. And it's a huge issue. And there was a state commission I was reporting over the weekend on this report that a state independent commission put out, saying that this just needs to wholesale be reformed. There's a lot of issues beyond just forest management, other types of infrastructure projects that are being blocked by this law. And it's not that the law was designed poorly, it's that environmentalists and environmental groups are weaponizing it to prevent just about any project, because they come from a more preservationist perspective rather than conservation. Conservation is tending to the land, right? Like, our ancestors knew this, but in today's modern world, it's preservation.
Yeah.
And that is just don't touch wildlife. Even in the case of with forest management, we know that we have to touch it. We have to treat it to prevent it from getting out of control and destroying huge swaths of land like we're seeing in California right now, in the LA area.
Gavin Newsom is the greasy governor of California, and he claimed this weekend that he's been talking to the governor of Hawaii. They dealt with their own catastrophic fire. And he said that he's working to learn some of the lessons from Hawaii.
We're dealing with a myriad of issues. I was just talking to Josh Green, the governor of down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up properties, and the like. So we're already working with our legal teams to move those things forward, and we'll be presenting those in a matter of days, not just weeks.
So he says he's going to impose restrictions on who can buy any of the relevant properties. Also, I saw over the weekend that he apparently signed some sort of executive order. It's 3 pages long, that is designed to, in the New York Times' headline, it's designed to suspend state environmental rules for rebuilding after fires. Now, do you believe this, Thomas Catenacci, that Gavin Newsom is actually going to get the environmental goons out of the way of rebuilding, or is this just for show?
Well, absolutely not. But I personally find it hilarious that he can just come out of the blue, sign this, and acknowledge indirectly that there were impediments to common sense policy when it comes to forest management. That's a major issue that needs to be addressed in California. And I hope voters are kind of getting some sense of what's going on here. The fact that the government knows that there's an issue, and it only takes this massive disaster for them to finally say, okay, fine, we'll fix the issue quickly, or try to fix the issue quickly. Why wasn't this happening months and months ago? Again, wildfires aren't anything new to California.
Also,
and
if
Gavin Newsom has tried to fix this issue allegedly. He's talked about it a lot. But when it comes to the actual wildfire, it takes after this disaster for him to do anything.
Also, if it's as easy as the governor's signature to clear the way for the betterment of the lives of the people that he represents, why isn't he doing this all the time? Why isn't he getting this law out of the way of all the misery? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't California complain almost every single day about a so-called housing shortage in their state?
Yeah, and one of the issues, again, to go back to the environmental permitting law, CEQA in California, one of the problems with housing is that law, because anytime a housing project or a housing development is proposed on state land or adjacent to state land, it has to go through this years-long, burdensome permitting process that inevitably will involve environmental groups, will involve NIMBYs, not in my backyard
Yes.
activists,
Yes.
people who just oppose every development, every piece of infrastructure. And so that's the issue, is getting to the root of the problem. What is causing all these delays?
And if you think about it for 2 seconds, you realize some of the corrupt market forces that are at work here. Because in the end, this doesn't necessarily protect the environment, but it does skyrocket the value of rich people who already own homes in California. If you can't get new construction underway because it's cost prohibitive, that means the filthy rich people who already live in this state are watching their property values go up because the government is interfering in the building of new homes.
Right, and it's such a good point. The commission that I referenced earlier, the Independent State Commission that did this whole analysis on CEQA and how it's blocking all sorts of different development projects, they mentioned in that report that they found a lot of the litigation related to environmental permitting is by these sort of like business groups and people with a financial interest, not just environmental activists, although they're very engaged on this issue, obviously. But a lot of business interests get involved because they know that they can, inflate the price of their goods or their property by blocking development near their property.
And they can block.
So it's all under the guise of environmentalism. They're weaponizing this law for their own good. And
it's incumbency protections, the same way with regulations out of Washington, too. It's designed to protect the big players and prevent small upstarts from taking any market share. And then they tell you it's for your own good. That's why it's happening. It's a totally corrupt world. I'm so glad that you're out there digging into it. Thomas Catenacci from the excellent Washington Free Beacon. It's great to talk to you today, sir.
Thank you for having me, Vince.
Always. Happy New Year. Thank you, Thomas. There he is from the Washington Free Beacon. More in a moment, including all that craziness out of California. I do have some more audio for you. But all right, to the phones we go. Reed is calling in from Arlington now on line 3. Reed, you're on the Vince Catenacci Show. Hello.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I'm a former firefighter, volunteer fire chief, and about 25 years ago I worked on a project that was funded by the U.S. Fire Administration to investigate major fires across the country. Major fires usually that resulted in either catastrophic loss of life or property or firefighter fatalities. And one of the fires that one of my coworkers had investigated, I was very familiar with, was a fire that happened in 1991 in Oakland. And it was extremely similar to the one we're having right now on a slightly lighter scale. It was, I think there were about 2,800 structures that were lost, and I think about 25 fatalities. And what we're seeing right now is history repeat itself. And unfortunately, the lessons that were learned and well documented from that fire by my former coworker have gone unheeded by politicians, local, statewide, within California. It certainly could happen in other places, but that fire was common factors, water supply issues, the Santa Ynez winds, or they call Diablo winds, that have fueled the fires, and problems with incident management and control, radio communications. I think in this fire, actually, they're doing better with incident command, because that's been something that's really been stressed in the fire service in the last 25 years. And radio communications have greatly improved. But, I mean, very common themes here: building construction, vegetation being too close to properties, vegetation not being pruned as appropriately as it should be. And a lot of that goes back to the environmental lobby and things, that are getting in the way of doing that. The fire departments really are up against a very, very challenging situation. When you get winds that strong, there's really no way to control a fire like that.
Right.
Especially when you don't do the long-term mitigation going up to it.
Right, because it makes sense to me that, there would be fire breaks of some kind to try and slow a fire down as it travels on land. But with winds that intense, throwing hot ash all over the place and embers, that's how you get additional fires started all over the place. But that water supply issue that you brought up at the outset, they experienced this in Oakland in 1991, and here we are, all these many years later, and the fire hydrants are just not productive in the moment of need. That strikes you as...
You've got to understand that if you had a fire right now in Washington, well, let's say you had a fire in Arlington, Virginia, with 10 houses, on a block,
Yeah.
you would have water supply issues because the water supply systems are not built to develop, to put that much water out at one period of time.
Sure.
So even if they had all that water, it would have been, they might have saved some more houses, but there's no way they would have taken care of, hundreds of houses that were burning down at the same time.
Right.
You can't get that much water out of the system. But I can tell you right now, I'm just looking at the report from 1991, and it's so eerie. It says, my coworker wrote, the factors that created the critical fire risk situation and the fire of October 1991 exist in hundreds of other locations, and when the same circumstances repeat themselves, there is every reason to expect that another very similar fire will result. Here we are. History is repeating itself. Nobody learned from that fire. And I'm telling you, this report that I'm reading you from is actually uploaded on the Governor of California's Office of Emergency website. That's why I went and found it, just to go back and look at it, to refresh my mind from the lessons learned.
And that report, was that under the banner of the U.S. Fire Administration?
It was created, funded by the U.S. Fire Administration. We wrote it. We were private contractors and wrote it.
Got it.
Or I should say my former boss wrote it. But it's out there for everybody to consume, and unfortunately, nobody's really learned the lesson.
Nobody's learned
in California.
The lessons. And you've been there to watch it in the past, and now once again in the present. Thank you, Reed.
You could take literally this report and almost just change the date and then location, and everything's the same.
Well, I won't be surprised if they do it. Reed, thank you for that. I appreciate that call. That's Reed in Arlington, who's had some experience with all of this before. Coming up, I've got some more from the chaos in California. In the midst, the fires are still raging, but the infighting has also started as the fire chief attacks the mayor. There's some rumors that the mayor has fired the fire chief, and meanwhile, people are still struggling to pick up the pieces. It's all ahead. Also, your calls, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 5:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. There is obviously the fires continue in California, and the chaos continues not just for the residents there, but among the people who are supposed to be responding to these fires. Do you see that the LGBTQ fire chief began turning on the city's leadership over the weekend? And she started coming out and saying, yeah, they failed us. They failed us. They failed us. This is after the media spent all last week defending the horrid state of Los Angeles and the fire response, saying that, the city actually increased funding to the fire department. They're doing everything they can to stop it. Meanwhile, the actual fire chief, Kristin Crowley, who, again, she's a proud member of the LGBTQ community. That's what the local media in LA say. That's what she says. That's what she features in her bio on her website for the fire department. She says, actually, it was a gigantic cut, and it really hurt us. It really hurt us. Now, that cut obviously comes on top of the fact that the fire department there was sending their supposed surplus equipment to Ukraine, and that they fired hundreds of their own firefighters who refused to get the jab. So that's how you end up with a fire department that's even less prepared for this chaotic fire. Here is LA Fire Chief Kristin Crowley speaking to CNN's Jake Tapper going into the weekend.
I want to be very, very clear. Yes, we took a $17 million budget cut.
Fact check. Anybody? How many media outlets have you seen this weekend claiming that there was no cut?
And as we know, any budget cut would negatively impact our ability to carry out our mission. I want to also clarify that I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant. It's my job as the fire chief for Los Angeles City Fire Department to make sure that our firefighters have exactly what they need to do their jobs. And that's why I'm talking to you today. The Palisades fire, everybody's seen it. It is absolutely one of the most horrific natural disasters in the history of Los Angeles. And even with an additional 100 engines, I tell you, we were not going to catch that fire. But with that being said, let me be clear. The $17 million budget cut and the elimination of our civilian positions like our mechanics did and has and will continue to severely impact our ability to repair our apparatus. So with that, we have over 100 fire apparatus out of service, and having these apparatus in the proper amount of mechanics would have helped. And so it did absolutely negatively impact.
All right, so what she's saying is that this is not merely a freak event that the humans could not have mitigated in any capacity. What she's saying is the leadership of California is failing its residents, and that there are things they can and should have been doing in order to, if not prevent this, certainly mitigate the destruction. And they have failed the people. There's obviously some blame shifting going on around here, too. There's like a finger-pointing exercise as everybody's pointing it in everybody else's direction amidst this chaos. She also said the fire department desperately needs help. We don't have enough firefighters. They did chase them away because of the COVID jab.
The fire department needs help. We can no longer sustain where we are. We do not have enough firefighters. With that, I have also requested multiple budgets, interim budgets, to show how understaffed, under-resourced, and underfunded the LAFD is. So with that, also, we have clear data that shows the LAFD needs more help. We need 62 more fire stations. These reports also show that we've had a 55% increase in overall call volume since 2010. And guess what? We're doing it with less firefighters. All right.
So Kristin Crowley directly blaming the leadership there in California for failing her and the people of L.A. But L.A.'s been wasting a lot of money. She's got an assistant fire chief there that makes something like, $400,000 to spread racial prejudice. They call it DEI. It's insanity. And speaking of water, which they didn't have enough of as this fire was raging, the head of the L.A. Department of Water and Power is a woman called Janice Quiñones, who was on a local radio station there called KBLA, and said at one point her number one priority is it's not water, it's not power, it's equity.
You call it powered by equity, and I know that it's been really important for the DWP to put an equity lens on everything.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the number one thing that attracted me to this role. Coming from the communities that I come, seeing what I've seen through my career in utilities and through the military. I've been in the Coast Guard 19 and a half years now, so I got 6 more months to qualify for my 20 years, which was my original goal.
Wow. Congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
How many Coast Guardsmen make $750,000 a year? That's what she's paid to be the head of the L.A. Department of Water and Power.
It's important to me that everything we do, it's with an equity lens and social justice and making sure that we right the wrongs that we've done in the past from an infrastructure perspective, and that we involve the community in that process. And this utility is serious about it, is authentic about it. And so I'm just super excited to be part of that movement.
Why didn't you leave water in the reservoirs? The LA Times reporting this weekend. The LA Times, which regrets endorsing Karen Bass. Its publisher has come out and said that. Whoops, our bad. We shouldn't have endorsed her for LA mayor. They reported this weekend that a massive reservoir in the Palisades, the neighborhood that just burned down, that holds 117 million gallons of water, was empty this month. It's offline for previously scheduled maintenance. Really? They scheduled the maintenance for fire season right in the middle of the Santa Ynez winds blowing up to 100 miles an hour. This is not unknown to the leadership. In fact, one of the criticisms that's being leveled against Karen Bass, the LA mayor, is you knew this was fire season. You knew the risks were immense, and yet you flew out of town anyway. You did leave with the warning bells going off. You just decided, well, I'm going to go to Ghana. This is predictable, they say, in a way that, for instance, earthquakes are not. But fire season, the conditions being exactly right for this kind of chaos, yeah, they know about that. And Karen Bass left anyway. And they left the reservoirs empty, according to the LA Times. The reservoir that held 117 million gallons of water, it was empty when the Palisades fire exploded. Could have used that. The people of L.A., or at least over 100,000 of them, are now demanding that Karen Bass step down. They're calling for a recall specifically. They want her to resign. They want her to be fired. Tens of thousands of Los Angeles residents have petitioned Democratic Mayor Karen Bass to quit her post. This is a Daily Caller report. When it was originally put up, it was only tens of thousands. Now it's hundreds of thousands are calling for this, alleging that she failed to respond properly to the fires raging across the city and oversaw financial irresponsibility. Quote, "We, the undersigned, residents of Los Angeles and concerned citizens, urgently call for the immediate recall of Mayor Karen Bass due to her gross mismanagement and failure to effectively respond to the devastating 2025 fires in and around the city of Los Angeles." The petition was began by a frustrated Californian. That's what it's called. Frustrated Californian started this, and it started on Thursday. Well over 100,000 people have now signed that petition demanding her recall, demanding she be fired. The governor of the state is greasy Gavin Newsom. He got on a teleconference, a Zoom call with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, a Californian herself. And he said, the real thing that I need help with is I need you to go after people who are criticizing me. Gavin Newsom asked elderly, brain-failing Joe Biden to, quote, deal with people who are criticizing his fire response because he knows that that's the kind of thing the White House does.
I ask you, we've got to deal with this misinformation. There were hurricane force winds of mis and disinformation, lies. People want to divide this country, and we're going to have to address that as well.
Don't let people criticize us. Do what you can to stop it. We've seen what you do with Facebook. Beat them into submission. Stop letting Americans criticize me. It's really putting a damper on my morning beauty routine.
And it breaks my heart as people are suffering and struggling that we're up against those hurricane forces as well.
What a goon. What a goon. That's hurricane force winds of disinformation, he says. Angry that people are criticizing him. And the rolling disaster that is California, this fire now the latest awful expression of that. And Gavin Newsom, you get on the phone with the White House. What are you going to ask the White House for? They said, would you censor the American people, please? Censor them. Meet the press. Gavin Newsom's done a ton of interviews this weekend. He's doing a lot of interviews for a guy whose state's on fire. And he was asked by Meet the Press whether or not LA is going to be ready for all of the things it's supposed to host, including a World Cup and a Super Bowl and the Olympics.
Over the course of the next several years, Los Angeles will be host to the World Cup and then the Super Bowl and then the Olympics. With this rebuilding effort needing to take place, is LA going to be ready for all of those global events?
My humble position, and it's not just being naively optimistic, that only reinforces the imperative moving quickly, doing in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation. President of the United States, Donald Trump, to his credit, was helpful in getting the Olympics to the United States of America, to get it down here in LA. We thank him for that. This is an opportunity.
Oh, by the way, this is in the last 48 hours or so, Gavin Newsom has been pulling this stunt where all of a sudden he's trying to cozy up to Trump. He's very mercurial. He's like changing his tactic moment by moment to see what he can get out of this thing. He wants Trump to come visit. You have to see the damage yourself. I want to work with you, Mr. President. And he's crediting Trump. He's like, great job on the Olympics. He wants Trump to save his skin. That's what he wants. He knows who's in charge. It's not Joe Biden. He knows Donald Trump is now less than a week away, and he desperately wants President Trump to save his political career.
For him to shine, for this country to shine, for California and this community to shine, the opportunity with all of that and all that opportunity and that pride and spirit that comes from not just hosting those three.
The same state, by the way, that's having a special session of its state legislature in order to, quote, Trump-proof California right now. That's in the midst of all the fires. And you see all these legislators being asked, like, what's the deal? What you're meeting to, quote, Trump-proof your state? How do you... Let me put that a little differently. How does a state, pass laws designed to president-proof itself? The president of the United States? We'd like to reject the duly elected president of the United States. I think that, if I have that right, I believe that's a revolution, what you're describing. I think that's an insurrection. We're going to reject the duly elected president of the United States.
Iconic games and venues, but also the opportunity, I think, to rebuild at the same time. And that's why we're already organizing a Marshall Plan. We already have a team of looking and reimagining.
A Marshall Plan. You know, like rebuilding Europe after World War II. That's what we're going to do. We're already organizing. Notice the filibuster that he's undertaking right now. It's only been broken up by my commentary, but this has been going on for nearly a minute where he's just going on and on and on and saying literally nothing.
LA 2.0, and we're making sure everyone's included, not just the folks on the coast, people here that were ravaged by this disaster.
You just said you're organizing a Marshall Plan for the rebuilding of California. What is that Marshall Plan?
For
Tell
this
us about
region,
this Marshall
we're
Plan.
just starting to lay out. I mean, we're still fighting these fires, so we're already talking to city leaders. We're already talking to civic leaders.
Let me absurdly overpromise something to you and offer no detail.
We're already talking to business leaders and nonprofits. We're talking to labor leaders. We're starting to organize how we're
going to have dinners at the French Laundry. We're going to get together with all of my donors. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to figure out who we don't want to rebuild for.
Can put together a collection of individuals on philanthropy for recovery, how we can organize the region, how we can make sure that we are seeking federal assistance for the Olympics more broadly, but also federal assistance for the recovery efforts, and how we can galvanize.
Get this guy a lifeguard. Do you hear how much he's like struggling to keep his head above water? Throw him a floaty.
Community with folks that love this community to really develop a mindset so that at scale we're dealing with the scope of this tragedy and responding to it at scale with efficiency like the executive order I talked about, time value of delivering projects, addressing building codes, addressing permitting issues.
He's so full of himself. You know, if any silver lining could possibly develop from all of this horror, can we once and for all end this idea that Gavin Newsom would be in any way a fitting nominee for any major political party as president of the United States? Gavin Newsom should have to live with this forever. Karen Bass, especially, she should live with this forever. All of these people. He should not be able to escape this. No matter how much grease he puts in his hair, no matter how much he filibusters, he deserves to own this. It's 5:51 now. All right, we're going to get more and more information as each day passes until the inauguration about how the president is going to spend it, what kind of activities will be taking place in Washington. We do know that he's going to be a part of a wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery on that Sunday. That's ahead of him going to the Capital One Arena to do a giant rally with the people. How unusual is that for an incoming president of the United States? Normally you spend it with your donors or at some black tie event. Instead, he's spending it with supporters and going to Arlington. Also, at the inauguration itself, it is now official that Carrie Underwood will be performing America the Beautiful, the country singer. That has caused a lot of outrage already on the left. The Daily Beast with the following headline: Carrie Underwood comes out as MAGA with Trump inauguration gig. No, she doesn't. She comes out as a woman singing America the Beautiful at a presidential inauguration. In fact, a couple years ago, she did some sort of like on-stage sketch where she was mocking Trump with Brad Paisley a while back. I don't know if it says anything about her politics other than she's singing at the inauguration because she's an American who's proud to accept that role. Okay, big deal. Also, one other thing, that garbage truck President Trump was featured in, there's some reports it may be in the inaugural parade. I hope that's true. Oh, man, that's awesome. The great one, Mark Levin, up here next.